you're ready, we'll start off. I'm Tom Bland. I work at Gorse Hill Studios, and I've been running Youth Cabinet for just about exactly 11 months. I'm still quite new to this, but I'm thoroughly enjoying everything that we do, and also just trying to get young people more enthused with politics and social justice and the effect they can have on the world. I'll now pass on to Mira, who's one of our members of Youth Cabinet, voted in the election we had this year. So Mira, do you want to say a few words?
Hi, I'm Mira. Like Tom said, I'm one of two of the members of Youth Parliament for Trafford. I've been here for nearly 6 years, and it's my last sort of secondary school conference that we're running together. So yeah, this is a big one for me, but I hope that everybody enjoys it. And we've got the lovely Jess talking about something we're all really passionate about at Trafford Youth Cabinet, so we can't wait. I want to go to Millie.
Hi, I'm Millie. I've been going to Youth Cabinet for about 2 years, and I'm going to be one of the kind of speakers with Freya later.
I'm Freya. I've been to Youth Cabinet for about 2 years, and I'll be doing some speaking with Millie. Jess, do you want to go?
Hi, I'm Jess. I'll do a proper intro later, but I'm a campaigner at Our Streets Now, and I'm going to be talking all things kind of public sexual harassment and feminism.
So without further ado, since Lauren seems to be AFK at the moment, Lauren works for Youth Focus Northwest, and for the last couple of months has been helping out with Youth Cabinet Trafford, because she is an ex-member and an ex-MYP who went over to set up her own charity and now works being a kind of youth worker, trying to keep all the other youth workers connected so that we can use our combined brains and our combined young people to try and deal with any of the issues in the local area and try and make Greater Manchester as a whole run a bit more fluidly for young people. We are part of the Greater Manchester Youth Combined Authority, and part of that is a monthly meeting where we all get together and, like I said before, just try and work out the best way to deal with the current issues facing young people in the local area. And I think on that note, Jess, would you like to take the floor?
Absolutely. I'm just going to share my screen. I'm hoping you can see that. Cool, yeah. Perfect. Okay. So as I said, my name is Jess. I'm a campaigner and activist, and I work with a grassroots organisation called Our Streets Now, which some of you may have heard of, and some of you may have absolutely no idea who we are, and that is completely fine. This is kind of me wearing the exact same cardigan, but our social handles are down here. So the first one's my Instagram, where I posted like infographics and all sorts, and the second one's my Twitter. And then feel free to tag us, Our Streets Now, along with anything kind of you hear or any quotes that you want to remember. We love kind of getting you all involved. So before we get started, I wanted to just share a little bit about me and how I came to be so in touch with feminism and campaigning and activism. So when I was about 14, 15, I joined kind of the youth parliament, and through that kind of loads of different doors got opened. I think I'd always noticed there were injustices and wrongs in the world, and I think the first time I noticed it when I was maybe in like year 4, year 3, and a teacher came into the room and said the classic, "Can I have 4 strong boys to carry this box of files for me?" And even at 9 years old, I remember thinking, what do you mean strong boys? Like, why boys? I'm strong enough to carry a folder too. And from then, I knew that there were lots of things wrong in the world, and there were loads of things that I wanted to fix. I just didn't have the resources to know how. So through that, I joined this wonderful list of organisations and kind of became really passionate about girls' rights, gender equality, and mental health and feminism in general. So when I was 15, I joined a charity called Plan International UK, and Plan International UK are an international children's-based charity, and they specialise in girls' rights. So at 15, I really bit the bullet and applied for this organisation to be on their youth advisory panel, and little 15-year-old me, somehow, who knew how, got in. And through that, I worked on loads of really cool international campaigns, local campaigns, and one thing led to another until earlier this year, I joined Our Streets Now, and so many amazing things have happened since. Also a reminder, just because I'm a feminist, I'm an activist, I'm a campaigner, I'm very much a normal, ordinary, sometimes pretty boring student. So I'm 19 years old, I'm from near Manchester originally, but I'm currently at the University of Sussex doing a degree in international development, which is super interesting. And if you're into activism, then it's definitely a degree you should look into. But I'm also just a very normal person. I like baking, I like taking photos, I like going on walks, I like traveling. And if you call yourself a feminist, it doesn't mean that you have no life whatsoever. It simply means that you believe in gender equality and equity. And that is kind of the ground base of this talk. Oh, some cheeky more photos. So over the past 4 or 5 years, kind of activism, I think, slowly snowballed, and a lot of you, or some of you, or perhaps none of you, may have seen some of the front-facing work I've done. So I've managed to go to some really cool conferences. I've been to Brussels, to France, to St. James's Palace, met cool people like Gina Martin, Amika George, Bill Gates, and met some really cool people doing some really cool work in the world. But a lot of this front-facing stuff is backed by hours and hours and hours and days and months and years of the back-face boring stuff. Feminism isn't all outward facing. It's not all going to cool events and meeting cool people. I would say 97% of the work I do is pretty boring. It's reading over policies, it's having arguments with trolls, it's introducing new concepts, it's educating people on what exactly is feminism, it's trying to get my great auntie to be a feminist. And if you can change one person's mind in feminism or in gender equality, that is so very powerful. I always tell people this, but the younger generation, a lot of the time we're called snowflakes. But they always forget that when you get thousands of snowflakes coming together, you know, what do you make? You make an avalanche of change. And it is so, so true. If all of you on this call kind of today just made one change in your life, or made one step towards gender equality, or had one conversation about feminism, that could change a lot of minds. And it very much is a ripple effect. So these are some of my favourite events with Plan International, different kind of things going on. And I'll talk a little bit about the TED Talk later, and some of you might be interested in watching it after you leave this webinar. Feminism for me was so important because it led to so many other things, and I think the people you meet in activism is incredible. If you're part of the Youth Cabinet, you probably know that the friends you make in Youth Voice are friends that will probably stay with you for life. And having conversations with people who agree with you is lovely, it's empowering, and makes you want to do this kind of work more. So what is feminism exactly? What a very good question, and what a very broad question. Feminism in its simplest terms simply means gender equality and equity. I remember having this conversation with a group of boys in my class, and I was trying to convince them that, you know, in the UK, we are very much not equal. The genders, there's a very much not equal between the genders. And it starts with language. It starts with phrases like cry like a girl, run like a girl, fight like a girl. You know, what does like a girl mean? When I say like a girl, what kind of thoughts come to your head? Same with kind of more boy phrases such as man up, grow a pair, man flu, to wear the trousers in a relationship, boys will be boys, or to get your knickers in a twist. There are so many phrases that we use on an everyday basis that are inherently sexist and provide almost a trampoline for more serious things that take place. Same with language and phrases. How often do you use gendered phrases such as postman, fireman, policeman? When you think of a doctor, do you think of a male or a female? When you think of a nurse, what kind of person are you thinking of? And we make these assumptions every single day. The same with women in public spaces. You cannot become what you can't see. And currently we have a very clear lack of female MPs. Just 4.4% of Fortune top 500 CEO roles are female, which is a tiny amount. If you think of some of the world's biggest companies, they are owned by men, and marginalized genders and females are often the ones left behind. there is actually a whole book on kind of the default male. It's called The Invisible Woman: Exposing Gender Data Bias. It's a really good book, and if you have the chance to read it, I always recommend it because it's amazing. But it talks about this default male we have and how dangerous it is. It refers to the normal as male. I think one of the examples that stuck with me in this book in particular was that in car crash tests, they would use a male dummy, and males have different muscle masses, they're taller, their muscle to fat ratio is different. And so females are more likely to be injured in a car crash and are more likely to die in a car crash. And a couple of years ago, when they did use female dummies, they put them in the passenger seats because, of course, women don't drive, obviously, which is wrong. There are so many things in life and in the world that look on the default male. It talks about kind of why toilets are sexist, why the doctor system is sexist. It's really interesting, kind of exposes this massive gender data gap that we have. Without filling that data gap for the years to come, we're going to live in a very unequal world still. So, understanding sexism in the UK. Sexism does go on in the UK, believe it or not, and it goes on a daily basis. You may have heard of period poverty. So 1 in 10 people who menstruate said they were unable to afford menstrual products, and 49% of people missed an entire day of school because of their period. Last spring, the government announced the free period scheme for primary and secondary school, which is really good. It was spearheaded by a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful human being called Amika George, who launched the Free Periods campaign in 2017. And it shows that campaigning works, fighting for feminism really works. The charity I work with, International UK, we launched kind of a period blood emoji last year or the year before to kind of try and help break the taboo. The same with body image and school uniform, and how school uniform is so heavily regulated for girls. I know when I was in school, I had my skirt being measured to make sure that it was no more than 2 inches above my knee, and how there is a lack of safe public space for girls. So going on to the main campaign. So Our Streets Now is a wonderful, glorious, student-led campaign to end public sexual harassment. It started with 2 people, and we now have a team of over 34 volunteers, ranging from students to academics, to lawyers, to illustrators, to bloggers, to social media managers. There is loads of us all giving up our time to try and end public sexual harassment. So who are Our Streets Now? So Our Streets Now is a campaign started in April 2019. When we first put out the petition, we managed to get over 100,000 signatures in 100 days, which is an immense amount. And the petition now stands, I think it's 210,000 just over. So when I made this PowerPoint, there were 20, but there's now over 30 of us, and we are all aiming to end public sexual harassment, both through cultural and legislative change, which I'll go on to later. And then recently, last week, we had a huge boom in our kind of community, and I think we now have 25,000 followers on Instagram, which from last year has gone up exponentially and kind of shows what campaigning can do. Since we launched, we've appeared on national newspapers, written opinion pieces for newspapers, met with dozens of MPs, recruited a team of internationally recognised lawyers specialising in human rights and violence against women, who are kind of all working pro bono to have produced this really important legislative bill. And it is clear that no legal path in itself can fully solve the problem, and that is why we do a lot of kind of cultural based work as well. So why do we use the term public sexual harassment? Some of you may know this kind of violence as street harassment, but Our Streets Now kind of adopted and came up with this phrase of public sexual harassment. So public sexual harassment comprises unwanted and unwelcome attention, sexual advances, intimidating behaviours by strangers occurring in public spaces. So this could be being shouted at in the street, it could be being grabbed on the bus. Any public space, any unwanted behaviour takes place is public sexual harassment. This can also be committed on multiple and very often in interlocking grounds. But I think what's really important to remember is that all forms of this public sexual harassment are inherently to do with power and control, and it is usually directed towards women, hence why I use the phrase women and girls often, and often oppressed groups in the society. However, this type of violence can be experienced by anybody. I think we use the term public sexual harassment because we know that this kind of violence does not just take place on the street. We know it takes place in gyms, parks, pubs, schools, university campuses, and all of this stops women and marginalized genders from accessing public life and public spaces, and has a really profound effect on everyday activities and kind of just going about their everyday life. Some key stats for you. So 2/3 of girls have experienced unwanted sexual attention. 1 in 3 have experienced PSH in their school uniform. And over 1/3 of girls have experienced verbal harassment at least once a month. I think if any of you watching this have experienced public sexual harassment in any form, you know the kind of the fear it creates. The fear it creates, firstly, the embarrassment when no one steps in, and just the feelings of dirtiness and ashamed it creates. It is not just what happens in that moment, it's everything else it makes you feel afterwards. I think the Young Women's Trust a couple of years ago found that women who experience sexism are 5 times more likely to have depression, which is a shocking stat because we know this kind of violence is inherently linked to anxiety, depression, body image, and so much more. So I'm now going to play you a really short video that we made as part of Our Streets Now that kind of goes a bit more into the effects it has on women and girls and marginalised genders. So I'm fingers crossed this works.
I first experienced public sexual harassment when I was 15 years old. I was on the train and I just finished a hockey match with my school team, and I was in my hockey uniform, and an old man, maybe in his like mid-40s, was standing behind me, and he grabbed my arse and
I was 15, the first time I experienced public sexual harassment. I had gone to town with a friend. We were just playing skip for milkshakes, try clothes on, that kind of thing.
He saw me telling them what had happened to me, and before the doors closed, he just got off the train.
It completely changed me. It changed my perception of the world. It stole my teenage years.
I was around 22, 23, and I was walking back from the shop, and there was 2 guys in a car, and they were looking at me, they were laughing, they were making comments about what I looked like.
And I was with my daughter, with my 3-year-old daughter.
Roaring out the window and said, "It's such wonderful." And
I was getting her out of her car seat to go into the pharmacy, and a van drove past and a man shouted out, "Hey, sexy."
And he pulls over beside me and he's saying, "Oh, you look beautiful in your school uniform," and try and call me over to the car, which is always really scary because like you just don't know, are they just suddenly going to jump out, grab you and put you in it? Like, do you know what I mean? You don't know where the situation might escalate, so it's always really scary. "Why are you walking faster? Do you think you're too good for me? Oh, I see. You think you're too good for me. That's why you won't give me any attention." It's so terrifying. Like, so many times I've actually just rounded the corner and sprinted home as fast as I can, slam the door behind me, lock it. I was too scared to turn my bedroom light on. And then I just stand there like listening, like praying they didn't see what house I went into. Because my bedroom was on the side of the road. And to me, I felt like, oh my God, if I turn the lights on, maybe they'll see where I live.
My name is Alma. I'm from Italy and I've been living in the UK for about 4 years now.
My name's Marie. My name's Phoebe.
I'm a young, happy fat woman trying to make change of a whole bunch of stigmas on a whole variety of topics.
Hi, I'm Vita. I'm 22.
Hi, my name is Angela Bernal. I'm 28 years old.
Hello.
Hi, my name's Chloe.
Hi, my name's Alexa. I'm 23 and I live in London.
My name's Daisy Riley.
My name is Megan.
Hi, I'm Rebecca.
Hi, my name is Hayley Rose Dean.
My name's Anya and I'm 14 years old from Essex.
My name is Ava Cullen. I'm a 21-year-old student.
Hi, I'm Jessie. I'm 26 years old.
And I'm going to be talking about my experience of public sexual harassment.
What age were you when you first experienced public sexual harassment? I was, I think, 11 or maybe 12 years old.
Around the age of 11, I remember being about between 7 and 10, 12, 16, 14, 8 or 9ish, 15, 13, 12,
15,
18 or 19. But at the time, I'd never think of it as sexual harassment. Like, it's just so normalized.
I never questioned it. I always thought that's just the way things are, and if I'm comfortable, this is me.
What I never realised is that what was happening to me was public sexual harassment. So no one ever told me that the boys in school pinging my bra, grabbing my ass, grabbing my crotch,
shout or whistle, catcalling or groped. Oh, I want to shag you, like get in my car.
Yeah, hey fatty. I like bigger girls.
Oh, hey sexy. Oi, you gorgeous. Oh, black chocolates. Oh, come here, I want a taste of you.
The boys that used to unhook your bra, the boys that used to grab your breast.
My friends' asses get slapped, and mine get slapped. And when lads like walk by you, they pinch your waist and move you along.
Touching your arms, because apparently having tattoos is a reason to touch someone and grab someone.
Touch me inappropriately.
All of that is sexual harassment. No one ever told me that.
I viewed my body as damaged and disgusting and vile, and
it felt as though there was something intrinsically dirty about me.
I remember I was wearing a tight dress that day and people said I looked pretty, and I remember I just wanted to go home, back to my house and change and never look pretty again. It's horrible.
Yeah. I never wore that skirt again.
You just automatically inherit this way of taking up less space and making yourself as small and unnoticeable as possible in order to remain safe.
And make sure that I was visible or noticeable in any way.
If I shrunk my existence, maybe it would stop.
It's terrifying and it's energy consuming and it's not a pleasant way to have to live.
It's still happening.
And it hurts. It's not okay. It's just not okay.
But things are going to change. And I'm sorry that you were scared for so long and that you felt ashamed. It's just because it's a stigma, and that's why we need to talk about it, and that's why I'm talking about it for you now.
To my
22, 15, 12, 14, 13,
15-year-old self.
You are so much more beautiful and worthy of love than you could ever imagine at this point.
It's not your fault.
It's not your fault.
It wasn't your fault.
It was not your fault.
You didn't deserve that. You did bring that on yourself. There was nothing that you could have done to stop that. I'm so sorry you weren't protected in that situation.
You are worthy, you are intelligent, you are beautiful.
And the reason you feel crap about yourself is because society tells you to feel crap about yourself.
You're not dirty, you're not wrong, you're not disgusting.
And it's not a compliment.
But that you do deserve compliments, and you will get them in a true and meaningful way from people who truly mean something to you.
How we dress, how we act is not an open invitation to be treated like pieces of meat.
Because you feel uncomfortable about it, that means it's wrong.
It's making you feel that bad. It is that bad. You know,
you're being overdramatic. You're not.
It's okay to say no and to stand up for yourself. And
you're so strong, stronger than you can even begin to imagine.
You are worth so much more. You are loved.
And your resilience? Girl, your resilience is everlasting.
You are going to do phenomenal things. You are a phenomenal woman.
Hopefully many times it will be safe to call people out and you should do it because it will make you feel good.
Speak up and not to be afraid to speak up and not to feel bad.
And it doesn't matter if it makes other people uncomfortable, because what was done to you was an uncomfortable thing and it needs to be spoken about. And as many people as possible need to be made to feel uncomfortable until the world is a safer place.
Talk to an adult about it, talk to my mum, because I don't think young people are, obviously we all didn't know.
And keep going, because you harness all these experiences to make change. Keep going. One day there's going to be an amazing campaign called Our Streets Now that are going to try and put an end to this, that are going to try and criminalise this.
We've hosted events, protests, grown a huge community on Instagram. We now have 20,000 followers, been on massive platforms like the Global UN Women account, as well as iWay. We've encouraged large organisations to pay more attention to harassment in public space and try to really put a spotlight on the damage it has on the lives of so many people.
So don't let the bastards get you down.
We're not asking for it, and we're not welcoming it, and we don't want it, and we're fed up with it. We fucking got this.
Sorry about the language at the end. I always forget there's a bad word. But every time I watch that video, I remember when I first edited it, I just cried, because everything they say is so true, and it kind of, if you ever experience this type of violence, you know how it feels, and what they're saying in that video resonates with me and so many people so much. And it's just such a powerful video, and it's on our Instagram. And if you ever forget or ever feel down about fighting for feminism or fighting for change, remind yourself what you're fighting for. Remind yourself you are fighting for lives and on behalf of women and girls and marginalised genders all across the UK and the world, and that is powerful. So I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint and just kind of go into public sector harassment a little bit more, and kind of all the different forms of public sector harassment and why we at Our Streets Now think it is so important. So Our Streets Now take an intersectional approach to public sexual harassment. So you may have heard of intersectionality, you may have never heard of it before, but it was a term coined by a professor called Professor Kimberly Crenshaw, and she used the term intersectionality in the 1989 academic paper. So this term itself comes from Black queer feminist thought. And it's when all different identities such as race, gender, disability, sexuality, nationality come together and acknowledges a person's range of social identities and sees them as a whole rather than considering them as separate entities and pieces. Also understanding that not all inequalities are created equal. I know as a white, cis, able-bodied female, I hold a lot of privilege. And intersectionality looks at power, privilege, and oppression. So intersectional feminism, centers the voice of those experiencing overlapping forms of oppression. We Our Streets Now recognize that all of us are made up of these multiple intersecting identities, and the oppression and the harassment we experience reflect that. Types of prejudice such as sexism or racism don't often exist in isolation, but often combine to form a new type of oppression entirely. Therefore, kind of by looking at everything through an intersectional approach, we see these inequalities, and it gives us a more accurate understanding of kind of the world we live in today. We know that girls or women or marginalised genders of a BAME background, of a BIPOC background, or who are part of the LGBTQ+ community experience sexual harassment more often, and they often experience it more violently. So recently we launched our massive legal campaign with the charity Plan International UK. And this campaign was launched last Monday, and it's called the Crime Not Compliment campaign. So over summer, we found that half of girls experienced sexual harassment just this past summer. This kind of public sexual harassment is an everyday reality for so many girls. They're being followed, shouted at, grabbed and groped, and they want it to stop, basically. This relentless harassment is holding so many people back. It's leaving us anxious, unsafe, and panicked, and all those other emotions that you heard in the video. It leads us to changing our behaviours. You might have walked home a different way. You might be someone who's told to hold their keys in their hand. As females or as different genders, we're told to take precautions to reduce the risk of being harassed, rather than telling perpetrators to stop harassing us. Girls face a double whammy of restrictions to public space currently due to coronavirus measures and due to experiences of sexual harassment. Despite the streets being empty over summer, sexual harassment went up. And this is why we're calling on MP and Parliament to create a specific law that criminalises public sexual harassment, because currently there is no law criminalising this kind of abuse. So as I said before, there are loads of different types of public sexual harassment, and I really want to quickly just really go over them really briefly. We did a whole pack. I spent my summer designing this resource pack, basically explaining public sexual harassment for the Our Schools Now project. And the Our Schools Now project aims to tackle this kind of violence starting with young people. So starting about teaching boys and girls and any other gender in schools about this type of violence. So many studies have found that those from the LGBTQ+ background often face public sexual harassment that is very queer-phobic, whether that's their gender identity, their gender expression, or their sexuality. And there is a very clear intersection between homophobia/queerphobia and misogyny. Queer women especially face both homophobia and misogyny at the same time, and they're quite often hypersexualized by the male gaze, and this stops them from doing the things they love and doing the things they should be able to do. All these resources are available on our website, under the Our Schools Now website, if you do want to kind of really read more into them. Same with racism. We know, as I said, girls and women from BIPOC or BAME background face really horrible experiences of public sexual harassment, and there is an intersection between racism and the different forms of PSH. One of the testimonies that really stood out to me was this one on the screen about this person walking home on the street and the guy following her. And there's a video as well that you can go to, and yeah, it's scary, but it's so important to realise that there are so many different forms of public sexual harassment. Same with underage. We know that girls, especially under 18, experience different forms of public sexual harassment, and often more dangerous forms sometimes. You heard me say a third of girls experienced it whilst wearing their school uniform. It has nothing to do with what you're wearing. Sexual harassment is all about power and control. And if you take one thing from this talk, let it be that. It's about power, control, and dominance, basically. A child who experiences this form of abuse may be more susceptible to victim blaming and blaming themselves and internalizing this horrible abuse. And whereas an adult might feel safer. So kind of underage girls experience it differently because they don't know kind of the boundaries and don't know it's not their fault. I know when I was first harassed when I was about 14, I was walking home from the train station in my school uniform, and this group of guys in a car drove past, shouted some horrible, really nasty stuff at me, and then just drove off. And I was left on the side of the street to just kind of deal with it. And as a 14-year-old, I had absolutely no idea what to do with all of these things they just said to me. And I think I very much did internalize it and was scared to go out on the street. I was scared to walk home, and it kind of stopped me doing the things that I perhaps should have done and love to do as well. Same with ableist public sexual harassment. So we receive lots of testimonies from people with disabilities, especially in the media. Sometimes people with disabilities are portrayed as being powerless and helpless, and they are kind of 5 times, I think this is in 2018, women with disabilities were over 5 times more likely to experience sexual assault than men with disabilities. So again, all these resources are available on the website, and I really do recommend you go and have a look. So I often get asked, you know, like, Jess, it's all good and well you telling us about public sexual harassment, but like, as a woman, as a girl, as a minority gender, what do I do if I experience it? My first reaction is that there is no right or wrong way to react to it. Know that you are very much in the right. Your perpetrator is to blame, so whatever you do, kind of, you are in the right, and trust your instinct. Your gut is so powerful, and your gut will often know what to do, and remember that your safety is a priority. Sometimes people find it really useful to kind of claim the space, so whether that be kind of shouting, person in the red hat, stop shouting at me, or person in the blue shoes, don't touch me, and kind of making that connection, and also sharing your experience, because this kind of violence can be really traumatic. So sharing it with an adult or your friend, or sending in a testimony, can sometimes be really powerful. And then sometimes people ask, you know, Jess, what happens if I see someone else experienced it and I want to help, I want to intervene? There are 3 things that we at Our Streets Now kind of recommend you to do, and that comes off the I Stand training, which I'll talk about later, but it's basically distract, delegate, or direct. So distracting is often a great way to deal with it. You go over to the victim and kind of say, oh, do you know the way to the shop, or kind of just taking the distraction away. Delegate, asking for help. So asking the bartender or a teacher, like, can you help with this, and bring the person over, or directly speak up. So our solution now is basically to prevent, promote, reduce, and tackle. So to tackle myths around victim blaming, to reduce the shame and stigma of sexual harassment, to prevent boys from ever becoming perpetrators, and to promote bystander intervention. Legislative change can be quite confusing, but we at Our Streets Now are calling on a specific law to make public sexual harassment illegal. In France, Belgium, New Zealand, they're kind of all laws that specify towards this, and they can be quite effective. And it's kind of based on a convention called the Istanbul Convention, which can be quite confusing, so I won't go into that. But basically, it would make this kind of violence illegal and reportable. We also do massive pieces of work on cultural change. So we have an incredible team of artists over on Instagram who make some incredible artwork that kind of put testimonies or experiences of harassment into illustrations, and that can be really powerful. This one about anxiety is one of my favorite. In her hair is loads of different things that people said when they got sexually harassed. Kind of talking about being afraid, being scared, feeling disgusting, and yeah, really, really clever bits of art. And then we also launched a project called Our Schools Now, which is launching properly in January. But on our website, we have really comprehensive lessons plans, resource packs that we all made, and we're all volunteers. We all do this in our spare time, and there's a template letter for your school. So if you want your school to teach about this, which please let them, or your society at uni or anything like that, you can have a look on our website, and there are loads of really easy ways to get involved and start educating and raising awareness about this type of gender-based violence. And the more people we can reach, the better, because this violence changes lives, and if we can prevent this violence, this becomes so incredibly powerful. A bit on reading. Feminism is all about reading. It's about reading kind of every book, blog, listening to podcasts you can get your hand on. These are a few of my favorite kind of books to do with feminism and intersectionality. But reading is one of the most powerful things I ever did, and I thoroughly recommend you read, you write, and just get as involved in feminism or activism as you possibly can. There are also loads more resource packs on a website called Youth Focus Northwest. Over the summer, I created loads of different resource packs on all sorts of issues. So if you're interested in kind of intersectionality and learning about those different identities, do have a look there. There's loads and loads to keep you busy and hopefully get you learning as much as possible. Even now, I learn so much from reading blog posts or listening to podcasts. You can never know enough, and talking about it is very powerful. So as I said, we go through awareness and education and legislative and political. If you haven't written to your MP, we would love it if you could and try and get them to support the campaign, because our laws reflect our society, and currently our laws say that this kind of violence is legal. And that is what's scary, is our laws are there to protect us from violence and from fear. And currently girls and marginalised genders are experiencing violence and fear. So again, what can you do? Have a conversation, create change, educate yourself on public sexual harassment, join our campaign, follow our Instagram, complete the stand-up bystander training. There are so many things you can do. This campaign started out with two girls, Maya and Gemma. It started 18 months ago and from then has snowballed into an avalanche. From when I did my TED talk on street harassment in April last year, everything has slowly gained momentum. The media started picking it up, people started picking it up, and people are starting to realise this kind of violence is not okay and will not be stood for, and something has to change, and something has to change soon. So yeah, as I said, in last year, I gave this really cool TED talk on street harassment. So if you're wanting to know more about kind of sexual harassment and the basis, have a look on YouTube. If you type in Jess Lee, TEDx Exeter, it will come up. Since then, I've learned so much more, but I would do it so differently, but I just thought it'd be interesting if any of you wanted some more information. And that is kind of the main bulk of PowerPoint. Just again, start a conversation, sign the petition in our Instagram bio, follow our social medias, and be an active bystander. I know that was very much a whistle-stop tour through public sexual harassment. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer any of them.
So for those of you watching at home or wherever you may be, there should be a Q&A option that you can see along the bottom of the screen. If you have anything you'd like to ask Jess in relation to this, or perhaps anything else that she might have touched on, please feel free to put something in there. I for one just want to say thank you. I was so moved by that video. It was amazing. And if anything, the thing I'm most sad is the fact that from looking at the people that are here today, there are not enough men, I would say, who are seeing this. And that's the biggest regret I have about this tonight, is the fact that there aren't more young men who are here viewing this, because I do think it is an important message. And I think the way it has been put across just really well puts across the importance of why it's something that we have to stop. And obviously we make up half the population, and really we need to be being the best allies we can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where the conversation really becomes important, is if you can have a conversation with the men and the women and just everybody in your life. I think you're only powerless if you believe you have no power. Every single person has this inherent and really incredible amount of power, and that is to talk and to share and to join. And if you talk, share and join, this has this amazing thing to create real change.
So the first question that has come up is in relation to what I said, and the question is, how can we engage boys in these conversations?
Yeah, so as you said, engaging boys and men is super important in stopping and preventing public sexual harassment. I think one of the most powerful things is through the Our Schools Now campaign. With that campaign, there is loads of resources and templates to go into schools, go into youth groups, go into all sorts of different clubs and reach everybody and talk about this kind of violence. I think a lot of boys and men just don't know how awful and horrible it makes us feel when we experience this. I remember when I first had a conversation with some boys in my year, they were quite apologetic about kind of shouting at women or girls because they just didn't realise how awful it was. And I think that's because we normalise sexual harassment so much. We see it in the media, we see women sexualised and it just becomes a normal part of everyday life. And unless we start speaking up, unless all of us make a real effort to speak to the boys and men and just people in our lives, this kind of violence will carry on. So I think us as individuals can just talk to as many other people as possible and encourage boys to be active bystanders, encourage men to talk to their other friends, and kind of keep this message passing along and going.
Another question that's come in is, do you have any good podcast recommendations to educate people on this topic?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of my favorite podcasts, I've just forgotten the name, Cheer Up Love. How did I forget that name? So Cheer Up Love is a photography project set up by Eliza Hatch, and she has series 1 and is creating a series 2 currently. And that has loads of episodes on, and it has people like Gina Martin, I think Amika George was on it, Maya and Gemma Maya and Gemma for R Street's also on it, and loads of other really cool people. And every episode they talk about that specific campaigner, as well as talking about an experience of public sexual harassment. So definitely check out Cheer Up Love. They're really, really interesting and good podcasts. And Our Streets Now also have podcasts with other people. They did one with Discuss with Hayley Rose Dean, and that is one of my favourite ones. I think it's really, really interesting. But yeah, Cheer Up Love's a good one.
I also know there's an episode or 2 probably of The Guilty Feminist that covers it. And that's also just a great general podcast for information about feminism in the modern world, and also trying to normalize the fact that you're not fighting every day, because you will tire yourself out. Does any of the people who are here as... Oh, Mira?
I've got a question. So we've been talking about it a lot within our own youth cabinet about sort of how schools deal with uniform and, you know, like talking to girls in like a really degrading manner. So I wanted to ask you how you think the best way it is to go to like school administration, because it's a really difficult conversation to have and you don't know where to start. And I think a lot of girls do feel like that.
Yeah, definitely. It's a really good question. I know when I first went to my school and complained in year 13 that one of the teachers had pointed out like a girl's bra strap was showing, I said that wasn't okay, to point that out, and she was allowed to wear whatever she liked as long as it was smart. They were quite aggressive and quite not nice about it. I think sometimes schools, especially certain types of schools or girls' schools, can be quite old-fashioned in their approaches. Honestly, there's probably no right or wrong way to approach it, but I think setting up a meeting or writing a letter to your head of year or to your form tutor or to the school council to bring it up would be a really good start, and kind of backing up with why this really harsh regulation and sexualization of school uniform is awful, especially when there's different rules for girls and boys. So I think definitely writing a letter, or setting up a meeting, or bring up in the school council. And every school will be different. I don't think there is one solution for every school. I think sadly every school will approach it differently and need different things in place and different conversations. But definitely have a look at the resource packs, because there is loads of information kind of out there there's podcasts to watch, films to watch, YouTube videos to look at. And again, there's sadly no wrong or right way. It just is just working with your school and trusting your gut in the best way to go about it.
And possibly my advice would be to look for people who are female in the positions of power, because with some of the stuff that came up just this evening, there's things that I didn't consider or think of. And so I think it's like you're more likely to find an ally probably among those who've experienced similar things. Next question. You mentioned legislative change in Parliament. Do you know if there'll be a debate on the issue or anything similar, or is it just writing to MPs and peers at the moment?
Yeah, so the legislative change is complicated. Currently, we're encouraging people to write to their MPs, because the way that bills are drafted and created, the more MPs we can get on board now, the better. So eventually, fingers crossed, will go to Parliament and go through all the kind of the formal measures. But currently, we really need as many MPs on board as possible, because as we know from the upskirting campaign, it can be blocked by one MP, and that's when it becomes scary. So if you can write to your MPs or encourage other people, That's what we're currently really focusing on right now, but definitely follow our Instagram to kind of see us as we progress through this legislative change. But yeah, law is complicated, so I think it'll be a slow process, but eventually, hopefully, it will get passed and get through.
And one of our attendees has just mentioned that apparently season 2 of Sex Education on Netflix covers it a little bit. Now, I've seen season 1, but does anyone here be able to fill me in on what I'm missing out with season 2?
I think there's a scene in season 2 where I think the character Amy experiences an experience of public sexual harassment on the bus, and I think that was it was good to see represented in a movie, because these things often happen, and often audiences don't get to see this kind of violence in the media because women are often over-sexualized, or the topic just isn't covered. So yeah, in sex education, it's good to see that there is finally some media coverage of public sexual harassment in kind of the fiction area. But yeah, it's a good season.
Now, does anyone else watching have any more questions, or any of the youth cabinet that are with me? In that case, I'm just going to go ahead and say thank you so much for coming on tonight, Jess. That was wonderful and enlightening. And I've already received messages from people I work with about how great they think this is and what a great speaker they think you are. If you'd like to say any closing statements, and then I believe the floor will be going to Freya and Millie.
I think the only thing that I have left to say is that you hold so much power, and if you can change one person's mind, if you can make one tiny impact in the world, that is more than we could ever ask for. Feminism is not about fighting every single day, really outwardly going to events, doing talks. Feminism is whatever you choose to make of it. It's having small conversations over dinner, it's reading a book, it's listening to a podcast. And we all hold privilege, we all hold power, and it's up to you to choose how you use that privilege and how you use that power to stand up and amplify other people as well as your own voice. Yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for listening to me and Freya and Millie. The floor's all yours.